Hello, good evening, and welcome to another edition of the Gersnet Podcast, the independent Rangers podcast by fans for fans, where all the content is absolutely free. We're coming to you in association tonight with Forrest Precision Engineering. I'm going to be your host this evening, Rob Fawcett, and I look forward to discussing the latest news on and off the field before previewing our visit to Kilmarnock with my guest. But before I introduce them, I'd encourage you to visit the Gersnet website. Not only do we have our main website with a regular stream of quality articles, an online museum, but it also hosts our popular forums, which are a great place to keep up to date with the latest Rangers news and discussion. We're live tonight on the YouTube channel, and we'd ask that you continue to share the pod on social media, spread the word, and please subscribe to the channel, as well as stop by the forums and join in the discussion there too. Now, I need to give another mention to our partners over at Forrest Precision Engineering. They're a Glasgow-based engineering company who have been a big commercial supporter of Rangers for a number of years, and we are delighted to have them supporting the pod. If you want more information about them, please visit their website at www.forestprecisioneng.com. They also have a stunning executive lounge in the Ibrox main stand, and for more information on that, you can email the club at hospitality@rangers.co.uk. Right, now to my guest for this evening, the man, the myth, the legend, and as Chesney Hawkes would say, the one and only Stewart Weir. How are you doing, Stewart? Glad the real football was almost upon us.
Yeah, good evening. The fact I'm not going to be speaking to you for the rest of the night should make this one of the most interesting podcasts ever.
I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to it as well, Stewart. How have you enjoyed the international break so far?
Who said that? Listen, I absolutely detest and despise the international breaks. There's a generation, me being part of that generation, who remember your team playing on a Saturday, the panic on Scott Sport of Arthur Montford telling you who was injured and who wouldn't be playing on Wednesday. Scotland going out and playing on the Wednesday, and then everybody's back from league duty again on the Saturday. Those days are gone, long gone. And I have to say, it's becoming a bit of a bore and a bit of a bind. Actually, the whole international scene, I'm just not a fan of it at all. I think there's too much emphasis on it. They're just making up tournaments now and making up matches. Where are the glamour friendlies they once had that we could say that we beat Argentina or succumb to Saudi Arabia or whatever it is? You're now, everybody's now complaining about having to play Poland and Croatia and Portugal. Well, that's what you get for winning promotion. If you can't hack it, get yourself relegated again.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll take a leaf at England's book for that and hopefully get a few easier fixtures next time. But I think like you, mate, I'm not a big fan of international breaks. I'm glad to at least have some proper football back. We'll see how Sunday goes before we commit to the rest of that. But I think there's been a fair bit happening actually in the last week in the lead up to this game. So I thought we'd probably start with the Niels Koppen interview. And one of the things that jumped out to me as part of that was how much work seems to be going on behind the scenes to transform the approach that we've got for scouting, both in the long term, but also then helping to try and identify and deliver targets that are going to help the team in the short term. I took from his interview the fact that we're building our own kind of data-driven scouting platform. We're looking to shift away from the lazy looking at the championship players and bringing them in on big money and, potentially not getting the performances out of them. There seems to be a massive shift towards young, hungry players. And I think even him mentioning about 55 and that as a point where we probably should have cast in on some players. I think this is what fans have been hoping to hear for a while. But is this a step in the right direction, do you think? Or is it a bit of a risky approach given the demands of success that we've got as a club?
I think hearing about it is always a bonus. The thing you really want to see is some kind of proof in the pudding. So to say, I think it's fine having all these plans and strategies and drawing up running orders and lists and, playing top trump against other teams and coaches and managers and all the rest of it. The fact of the matter is you want to see some kind of result at the end of the day. And I think for too long, and it has been a hell of a long time, for too long, Rangers have had to go out and buy people. What is the point of having a coaching network or a scouting network or indeed an academy if you're not producing your own players? And I know people will say, "Oh well, we got Patterson and Gilmore and right, and who else?" That's the point. And if you're going to bring them through and then sell them before you even see the first team, almost, what is the actual point of actually raising anybody other than to make it some kind of cash cow? Now, Rangers could be doing with the cash, whether to bring in new talent in January or a new CEO or, a new managing director or whatever it might be. But the fact is that Rangers have been badly lacking in terms of the academy structure or system. And people will say, well, there's a lot of clubs like that. There might well be, but equally, there's a lot of clubs who've profited from actually running their academy strategy and doing it well. Exhibit A, Southampton. You know what I mean? They have cashed in on it time and time and time again. And as I say, you either cash in it in one of two ways, either producing players that you then introduce into the first team, or you bring in that talent and then sell it on. And either way, it just ain't happening with Rangers.
Yeah, and I think that brings us to the next point I was actually going to bring up around the signings in the summer. So he'd obviously mentioned during that the average age of player that we brought in was about 23. And I think that's the thing that came across to me that he was making a real point of, that these are the types of profile that players we want to bring in, young, hungry for success. But he was quite open that he wants about 80% of them to be thinking about moving on. He wants them to be coming here with a will to perform well for the club, to win things, and then potentially use us as a bit of a stepping stone to a Premiership or another top 5 league. Do you think that our fans have the mindset that we'll take to that? Or, we saw with Raskin when he talked about ending up the Premiership, and, fans didn't exactly react well to that. But I'm like you. I mean, we've either got to grow our own, or we've got to bring young, hungry players in to make the team successful and then reap the rewards of building their profile. It's got to be the way forward, surely.
Yeah, it has. Somebody just correct me there. The difference between Rangers and Southampton, they need to win every game and the subsequent pressure. Really? Do you think the guys at Southampton are under any kind of pressure? They need to stay in the top flight. To make money. The difference between Rangers and Southampton, I would say, is maybe Southampton get an easier ride of it, but Rangers have been full of players who just haven't lived up to the badge in recent times, and that is the biggest failing at Ibrox, or one of the biggest failings at Ibrox. The thing is, the whole thing about academy structures and raising players and all the rest of it is fine when it works. When it doesn't work, you then come second. One of the best examples of that I could raise in the last 25 years would be in Norway, would be Rosenborg, who sold players to everybody, sold players to Germany, to Italy, to Spain. Rangers signed a couple, Celtic signed a couple. And then all of a sudden, for 1 year or 2 seasons, that stopped. And all of a sudden, they were second in the league. And, others come in and took the top spot. Do I think that, Rangers fans would accept that? Well, not really. But then again, they're accepting being second and have done for a hell of a long time now. So I don't see what the difference would be, even if you sold your players.
Yeah, I think it comes back to that reinvestment in the squad and how we can get the best out of them. And, I think we saw the turnover of player. He spoke about the short turnaround from January to summer. And I think it's been interesting because there's been some successes, I think, in that. I mean, I quite like Connor Barron. He's come in at the team. He's come in and looked fairly decent. How do you think Koppen and the team have performed in those windows so far with the players that we brought in? Is it a pass mark for them, or have they still got a bit of work to do there, do you think?
I think it was a report card you'd be writing, you'd be saying, must do better. I think Barron has done well. I'm genuinely impressed with him. I think he's handled the move and, dare I say it, the expectation at Rangers He's been like water off a duck's back. He's just got on with his own game. And I think that's maybe the thing. He's actually gone there and backed himself to be a success at Ibrox on his own ability and his own talents. He hasn't tried to perform and suddenly, turn into, Rainer Bonhoff or Gunter Netzer or Lothar Matthäus or something like that. He's just done his own thing. And I think that's why he's looked so impressive. I think the whole thing about players coming into Rangers, some of them will hack it and others don't. And I noticed somebody there mentioning Ali McCoy's interview with Sir Alex Ferguson. The whole thing with that is about the expectation levels is absolutely fine. But you go back, a good few years, a couple of decades, the Rangers players at that time didn't need to be told, oh, there's a big expectation level. They knew what the expectation level was going to be when they move. Go and speak to people like John Brown. Go and speak to people like Davy Robertson. Go and speak to people like Richard Gough. Now, about 32 years ago, round about now, Rangers beat Leeds United to reach the Champions League for the first time. And Harry Harris in the Mirror, who knew Goughy from his Spurs days, said, this must be the biggest result you've had in ages. And Goughy stopped them, midstream and said, no, the biggest game you'll have in ages is coming on Saturday against Celtic. And Harry Harris said, really? He went, aye. He says, because if we lose to Celtic, they'll suddenly become British champions. And that was it. That was a level of expectation, and that was a level of demand that players put on themselves. And I don't see any of that. And have they done, for some considerable time? I don't see players making that demand of themselves.
Yeah, and I think it's something that we've noticed for quite a while. To be honest, you always talk about captains and leadership, and you don't need an armband to be a leader on the pitch. And I think that there's definitely a lack of that throughout the team at the moment. Now, we've seen it, young Barron coming in. I've seen him bawling players out during the game and telling them to take responsibility. He's going to be young. He'll make his own mistakes himself. But we do need more of that, I think, within the whole team. You mentioned some of those great players of yesteryear. They would hold their teammates to account because they knew stepping out onto that pitch for Rangers was an honour, and you had to hold your end up at your end of the bargain up. If you didn't, that's when the fans began to turn. And it'd be good to see more of that fight and more of that accountability across the team. The best scouting system in the world is not going to give you that. It's only until they pull that jersey on that you really see what they're made of, isn't it?
But that applies to, Rangers are not unique. That would apply if you went and looked at whoever is playing across the city, or if you went to Newcastle, or you went to Manchester, or even, dare I say it, Norwich City and Ipswich. There is a demand on people, and some people live up to those demands, and others just fold. And I just sometimes, I'm not asking anybody to, do some kind of character research into some of these players, but I think when a player arrives and what he says, whether he's up for it or not. And something that really irks me is there is nobody in that dressing room, and I mean nobody, who's taking players to one side and saying, this is what it means to play for Rangers. And that would, you could go on high, even that to be the manager, and you're still not getting that message from from anyone, because there's too many in there having a free ride for too many years.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I think we've lost a lot of good Rangers men. Even the fact that Jimmy Bell passing, the standards that he would set as a kit man and letting people know what it meant to play for this club are badly missed in that back room and that dressing room as well. So I think there's a massive bit of work to go on to that. I think the next person we heard from, which was interesting, I wasn't expecting a statement to come out, was from the chairman. I guess the first point I really wanted to pick up on that was around the topic of pyro, I guess. I think, personally, I do think it looks good when it's done correctly. It does add to the spectacle of a display that the fans put on, and it's done all across Europe. But I do think there are a lot of times where we just shoot ourselves in the foot. I think the Lyon game was a prime example of that. We used it, it delayed the game. We'd made a strong start. It gave Lyon a bit of a breather and time to regroup. And I think the manager mentioned it in the post-match comments. What's your view on this? Do you think it's about time that the football community got its heads together and had a proper conversation on how we can do this safely and responsibly instead of a blanket ban, because it looks like the people that are doing it won't stop regardless of what any club official says or what any association says.
I was castigated and criticised for my stance on pyrotechnics several years ago. I don't want them anywhere near football. And all this, I'll use the word, all this pish about you only get an atmosphere if somebody sets fire to the guy next to you. Utter shit. I mean, were there any pyrotechnics when Rangers played Leeds United? No. Was there any pyrotechnics when Rangers played Bayern Munich all those years ago? No. Was there any pyrotechnics when Rangers, reached the final of the Europa League all those years ago? No. But you don't need them. Until somebody picks up a flare or a hand grenade or something like that with Bulgarian writing or Polish writing on it that says, under no circumstances, pull out this pin, and it blows their arm off. And then everybody will feel sorry, that boy's lost an arm. So what? Pyrotechnics don't have any place in football. If you want to go and set fire to things, wait until bonfire night. Or better still, go and join the Royal Navy and learn how to shoot a howitzer or something like that. I don't think that I just don't get the this need to set fire to things just to give yourself an atmosphere, and then choke yourself with the smoke. I mean, what's that about? And you're absolutely right about the European tie. Let's just wait until this smoke disperses. What do you think we should do now? Well, they're coming at us this way. Let's cut them off here. Let's cut them off there, and start the game again. And all of a sudden, it looks as if Rangers hadn't even had a team talk.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, I think for me, it's not about the atmosphere piece, because you're right. Parma was one of the best games that I've been at as a Rangers fan when we beat them, and the stadium was bouncing, and that was in a day where pyro and that sort of stuff wasn't a thing. It's just that it's something that's happening more and more across European football. There are more and more clubs doing it. I think there are occasions where it does look and adds to the display. It doesn't add to the atmosphere, I'll give you that. It'll be interesting to see how it happens, because the big thing for us is going to be if it leads to a stand closure. That's when we'll start to feel it in the pocket.
Yeah, and I'll ask you something, Rob. How does it add to the spectacle if you can't see the fucking pitch?
At the start of the game, no, you're absolutely right. Again, that's why it's looking at the options to be able to allow the fans to do it without it impacting on the game. And the frustrating thing for me is when it delays the game, because it just gives teams the ability to reset, especially in a home tie, especially in European football. You've got to come out of that kind of all guns blazing, like we did, created a good chance, and then you just allow them to regroup and sit back in again. So yeah, it's a debate that I think that will continue to go on, and yeah, we'll see what happens with that one, I suppose.
Not here. Yeah. I only got one vote, and I voted against it.
Nah. Cool. So that moves us on to the other part of the chairman's statement that I wanted to pick up on, which is the structure at the club at the moment. And something that irked me a little bit around the comments and looking for a chairman and a CEO. So we've obviously still got no chairman, no CEO, no director of football ops, and no academy director. So again, kind of going back to your point earlier about how the hell are we going to bring players through when we don't even have anybody that's responsible for the structure here at the moment. But it also looks like we've only just compiled a shortlist for the replacements of at least James Bisgrove, who left 5 months ago. Surely that lack of structure has got to have a bit of an impact on how Clement has been able to get resources into the team. But more importantly, how the hell is that impacting the young boys that we've got across the structure in Rangers and giving them a vision on how they can break through to the first team if we've got no, academy director or director of football operations?
I'll be honest, Rob. The only thing that might benefit Rangers is if they have a glut of injuries. If enough injuries is, it's like emergency ward 10 or casualty. I mean, the physio's room must be the busiest in the country, the amount of players that are injured. I mean, you've got guys there you're looking to be made of granite, and they've got a skeleton like Edinburgh Crystal. I've never known any club to have as many injuries and long-term injuries as Rangers do. So you're looking for maybe a youngster to take a chance, or a couple of youngsters, and at that point in time to emerge. I don't want to make this to sound like all our yesterdays, but if you look at Rangers in the 80s, and they were struggling then, mid-80s, it's obviously they were able to introduce Derek Ferguson and Ian Durrant into the team. Now it might be that somebody gets a chance and takes it. We go back to one of the points we made earlier. If they do come into the team and get a chance and actually take it, how long do they then remain a Rangers player before somebody's basically touting them about saying, well, you could move for 10 million quid, son, and we've got somebody like Newcastle or West Ham or Everton or whoever it is, it might be interested in you. It's almost like you end up ticking all the boxes just to untick them by flogging those players on. And also, if a manager has gone out there and bought half a dozen players and then two kids emerge, it's going to take a manager with some balls to actually go and pick the two kids before he then picks the guys that he's gone out and bought or scouted or paid big money for. He has to justify those guys or buying those guys in the first place without Rangers, on high or whoever it might be at the time. I mean, I can't see anybody. There isn't a chairman or a chief executive like to chap on the manager's door anytime soon and say, what is going on? That in itself isn't making the demands on the manager you're looking for. So it's like it's a big, huge, giant circle just now. Who is leading? Who's leading this club? Who's responsible for development off the pitch and on the pitch? Who are they answerable to? And when are these positions going to be filled? Because somebody was explaining parts of this to me the other day. Not that it took much explaining, but they made some sort of nuanced points that if you are, supposedly in charge of recruitment, who do you take your bit of paper to? I've identified somebody here. We have got 4 days, 5 days to work on this, to action this, or that player goes somewhere else. And there's a fair chance just now he goes somewhere else. And that's an unworkable situation. And to be honest, I mean, he's made some mistakes, but Philippe Clement must be sitting there saying to himself, am I only guy, aboard this ship? He has to be able to go and speak to people and say, this is what I'm demanding, or this is what I need. If there are people not there, he's as well talking to the wall, or sitting in the house with the wife, or going for a nice dinner down in Largs someplace, rather than taking training. So I have never known a club to be in such a shambolic state, and it is a shambolic state.
And that's my worry. It's how long it's going to take us to recover for that. Because take the Bisgrove replacement as an example. If it's somebody that's in a position at the moment, they're probably going to be on a 3-6 month notice period if they're in a job. So that means that we're looking for just ex CEOs that are unemployed. In which case, why the hell are they unemployed? Are they going to be a good fit for the club? And it's how long it's then going to take us to get these replacements in the structure to be sorted before it actually has any form of impact. So I'm like you. I mean, when I heard that we were just drawing shortlist up, that really frustrated me, because it's not as if we've not been looking for a CEO for the last 5 months. So surely to God we should have had a shortlist up, and it should be down to the last couple of candidates by now. Whereas it doesn't look like until Gilligan's taken over that we've actually started looking for it. So yeah, a frustrating one, but hopefully we can leave the moans behind now and we can start to focus on some of the football, which should be nice. Obviously, it was an international break. We had a fair few players involved actually. Stewart played in both of the Scotland games and was man of the match against Portugal. Now, I'll be honest, I've always had a bit of worry about Suter. I think he's a really good start to the season. Do you think he's coming into his own a wee bit more now because he's back in that right hand side of defence, or is it because he's probably injury free, for want of a better expression, and is getting a good run of games now?
I think confidence in your own fitness is a huge part of things. If you're going into games thinking you're indestructible rather than you're just going to, break the next time you go into a challenge, I think that's taken a lot to do with it. I know he had an outstanding game against Portugal. I think I'd pass judgment if he had an outstanding game in the 88th minute when Rangers were 1-up against any team in the top flight, or in a cup tie against Hearts, or a league game against Celtic or whatever it was, and see him holding his own then. I'm always reminded of, well, it's an outstanding in Ronaldo. Ronaldo was playing in a log flume, in the flume at the baths. I was surprised he didn't come out with a towel around his waist for the warm up with his flip flops on, or sliders, can I say, in the modern era. But I mean, did he really want to be there? All he did was moan. And you go back to the game against Spain, their players moaned. And you go back as far as Al McLaren, the outstanding game he had against Baggio, who was running about with the gloves on, looking absolutely frozen, and really didn't want to be in Glasgow playing in a World Cup tie. So yeah, he had a good game. It will help his confidence, but I still think the biggest question marks in terms of what he does is basically when he pulls on a blue jersey at Ibrox, and see how he handles the pressure there, game after game after game. I still think he's the type of player who will always have a mistake in him, but I think just now he's feeling a lot better within himself, and you have to encourage that kind of confidence.
Yeah, I think it actually says a lot about maybe how weakened we are at the back now, where we're probably putting him as our best defender. Because I'm like you, I think he still does have a bit of a mistake in him, albeit that he has probably had a much better start to the season.
I think he's made it simple for himself.
Yeah.
I think he's made it simple for himself, Rob. He's kicked the ball. He's kicked the way he's facing. He's not suddenly trying to turn into Franz Beckenbauer or, Marcel Desailly or whoever it is. He's basically done the basics, and the ball needs scalped into the crowd. He scalps it into the crowd. If the opposition player needs scalped into the crowd, he can do that as well. He's not trying to be too fancy. And I think he's almost cut some of the errors in judgment out of his game by making it simple.
Yeah. And that brings us to the two Rangers players that were actually playing against each other in their ties, Barami and Černý. Černy's Czech Republic obviously get the better of Albania. But what have you made of Barami so far in his start to his Rangers career? I think there's definitely looks like there's a player there. I'd love to see him play as a 10 a bit more once we get injured players back, and I think I'd like to hope that that's where he would play. But from what I've seen so far, I'm quite encouraged by what he can bring to the team. What's your view on him?
Barami's the kind of player that at times you look at what he does and you say, what are you doing here? Because you should be playing at a different level. Černý, on the other hand, you ask the question, what are you doing here? Because he just seems to get in rabbit holes. And everybody knows, I mean, there's one-trick ponies. I always remember somebody saying about Mark Walters, he's only got one trick. And Kevin Drinkle saying, but what a trick it is. Černý, it has to cut back inside onto his left foot. He looks like somebody who's got a wooden leg when he tries to do anything with his right foot. So that makes it easy. He's not got the talent of somebody who's a Davy Cooper, for instance, who even when he put it on his left foot and you knew it was going on his left foot and you knew he was going to cut inside and you knew he was going to, dummy, and you knew he was going to have a shot and you still couldn't beat him. Černy's too easy to read. And whether that's down to a lack of game time, lack of confidence, lack of fitness, I'm not sure. But he has more to prove than his cohort has. But I think there's a player there, and he he does look a player. Just to pick up on this, that's twice Stewart has said a player has to keep it simple, Suter and Barham. Does the manager deserve credit for that development? Possibly, absolutely. Somebody has to be telling them that, because if you look at it's a good point. Somebody has to be telling them to just do your job, and that has to come from the manager. I'll tell you one thing: it's not coming from anybody else in that team.
I know, absolutely, and I think, like you said, I mean, keeping it simple should free you up to play better. If you stick to your job and you stick to your task, and you're part of what that 11 players on the pitch need to do, then it's a fairly simple game at the end of the day. But it's when you have one weak link in that chain, that's when it all falls apart. And when you've not got a man tracking back, and when you've not got somebody running into that bit of space, that's where we as fans get frustrated, because we can see it for the stand. The ones that aren't putting the effort in are wanting to take that chance. So you're right. The manager probably does deserve a bit of credit for trying to get them to keep it simple. But equally, your players have got to start delivering on the bloody pitch at the end of the day. The manager can't play for them. Yeah, that's part of it. And that brings me back to the point you're making about Cherny, because I think before the international break, it's probably one of the more honest interviews a player's probably given after a game. Getting the 2 goals against St Johnstone was good for his confidence. Are there some players you think that we maybe as fans need to back off a wee bit from, to allow them to free themselves up and the people that maybe got more fragile mentalities?
Well, let me roll back quicker than Sir Steve Redgrave on that one, to something we said right at the start about levels of expectation. If you're turning up at Rangers, you must know what the expectation is. And you must know that the fans are going to be demanding. And the way fans demand of you is to tell you how you're doing minute by minute. And if you can't hack that, or you're suddenly surprised by that, what are you doing at the club in the first place? I think it's difficult. It's difficult to back off on criticism of a player when all they're doing is making mistakes or making errors that are worthy of criticism. You cannot criticise somebody because they're wholehearted and they've got broad shoulders, and then ease up on somebody because you don't think they can take it. That's not how it works as a football fan.
Got that, mate. That's good. So the next one's probably going to focus on under 21s, actually. So Barron was initially involved in there for Scotland, got called up but didn't get used as part of the Portugal team. Is the call up to the main squad for him a sign of just how well he started here at Rangers? What's your view on him so far? I know you'd said at the start you thought he'd come in and done well, but do you think there's more that we can see from him at club level?
I think it's a combination of different things, Rob. I think it's a combination of other players not being there. I think it's him actually looking the part at Rangers, and maybe it's identified that there's somebody who's gone in and is playing a game, playing his game at Rangers, looking, pretty comfortable or confident under a bit of pressure, and taking it from there. He's made mistakes. Listen, the man who never made a mistake never made anything. So let's not kid ourselves here about he's been perfect. He's been far from perfect. He gave away a goal in the European tie. He's, sometimes I would say bordering on rash, and has managed to not to pick up bookings when maybe he was deserving of one. But the fact is, I think he's promotion in the Scotland senior team is a combination of different things. And he's got to take it. He's got to be happy with the move, the promotion, and see how it pans out in the future. I still think everybody's fit. Does he make it in just now? Well, I'm not sure he does. But then again, there's some of the players that are getting picked at the senior level who just are not doing it and haven't cut it for some considerable time. So there might be a gap there for him.
I think he's been a really good player for us, and again, back to the comments about recruitment, I guess an example to hold up of why we should have been looking at maybe some more of these young homegrown players before, because they get the club, they get what it means to play for Rangers. And for me, you're right, he makes a mistake, but the one thing that you will see from him is graft to make up for it and
I'm popping off to Bologna this weekend. 3 nights in Bologna. I'll take in a couple of games and look at this player and that player. When you could get a 56 bus out of Glasgow to Shorts and pass for Park and see a couple of better players that would be more suited to Rangers and what they're trying to achieve domestically. Because you only want to achieve in Europe if you're successful domestically. And that's where Rangers, I think, the priority should be. It's great playing in Europe. And I'm probably contradicting myself by saying I'd much prefer to see Rangers succeed in Europe, because it's a completely different ball game playing there. And people recognise what you do in Europe more than what you ever do in a duopoly in Scotland. But the fact of the matter is, you need that success, home-based as well.
Absolutely. And I think for me, you look at every really successful team that Rangers have had over the years, the Souness, the Smiths, Advocat, you've always had a core of Scottish players in there. Because they were the ones that, like you said earlier, that set the expectation for everybody else that came into that team. They were the ones that knew what it meant, knew what the club meant to the fans, and was able to articulate that to the players that came in and hold them to account.
Players bought by Rangers for no other reason than they were Scottish. Now, I'm not going back to when you had you only could play 3 foreigners. Colin Hendry ended up at Rangers. Did Rangers need him? No, but they needed a Scot, and who better to buy at that time than the Scotland captain? So it has been done in the past that Rangers needed a presence of Scots just to remind them that they were actually a Scottish club.
And the other player that was involved at under 21 level for the Netherlands was Cassian Weirjo. Got 2 cracking assists. Obviously, we saw him against Malmo, and I think he had a fantastic game against Malmo. Given Clement's comments about resting Tavel in the season, are you surprised we maybe haven't seen more of him at right back in some of these games to give Tav a bit of a rest?
There are parts of what Philippe Clement says, and you suddenly go, "Oh yeah, okay, let's see what's going to happen," and nothing does. You're sort of lifted and buoyed by the expectation of him trying something different, and he reverts to sort, reverts to type, and you would like to see some of these boys getting a chance, because the fact of the matter is they are effective at a level where if they do have a couple of good games and they come in for a European tie or a big league match or a cup tie or whatever it is, and they do look good, other coaches and scouts will be taking notice of that there's somebody that Rangers have got just now and they're just not utilising. And it doesn't take much for somebody to, drop a sugar cube of doubt into players' minds that, are you really getting utilised here? Would you like to come somewhere else? And that's how it's done. And again, Rangers are not in a position where they can actually be saying to different players, "Oh, we want to keep you for another 18 months before we use you." No. There's nothing in that team significant, or nobody significantly great enough in that team, possibly other than, I would say, Butland, that would actually hold down his position without being challenged.
Yeah, and I think for me, I mean, the little bits that we've seen of him, he definitely looks like a prospect. He's strong. He looks very comfortable on the ball. He's 2-footed. We've got an option to buy on him, but it's only be worth exercising if we actually play him. And that's where I'm coming from. It's like, surely to goodness, we're looking for young, hungry players to come in. And there's an example, capped at under 21 for the Netherlands. He's obviously got something about him. So if these are the types of players we're going to be going after, we've got to be giving them game time at some point.
Yeah, I completely agree with the point you're making. You have got to let it's basically, it's like somebody in the street or in the pub saying, "I could take you," and you have to say, "Right, come on, let's see what you've got." You have to see what these guys do when the pressure's on and when the demands are on. And you're not going to do that sitting on the bench and getting 5 minutes at the end against cows and beef.
Absolutely. Which brings us on pretty nicely. So I hope you've got your crystal ball at the ready, Stuart. Because I want to ask. It's no predictions yet, mate. It's no predictions yet. I want to. It's more to see. I've kind of built this wee bit of the Clermont lineup bingo. Just to see if we can get more than 5 or 6 players of the starting lineup right. Who do you think we're going to see at the weekend in that lovely plastic pitch?
Well, I think I'll start with the goalkeeper and 3 of the back 4. So I think I'll go Butland, Tavernier, and the 2 centre backs. I think then I'll probably go Barron, which gives me takes me up to 5, and then Permini 1 from 15, because I know that I appreciate it, and I wholly get that you might be picking some players sort of horses for courses sort of type thing, but at some point in time you have got to field your best 11 regardless. I know there's a hutch full of injuries again. I know there's guys that basically right at this minute in time breathing is dangerous for them, but you have got to have some kind of solidity where you're picking 8 or 9 or even 10 of your first team for all your big matches. Forget the rotation. Rangers are not good enough yet to rotate, or even, I would say they're not even good enough to rest players. So pick your best team. And the fact that you're still sitting here in the month of October, okay, we've had 2 international breaks, and you're not quite sure actually how many of the players that are listed in the first team squad are actually going to be in your picks. I think it says a lot about the uncertainty at Rangers.
I think there's more chance of probably predicting the national lottery numbers these days than there are picking the first team for Rangers. Whereas back in the day, you could probably predict, 9, 10 of the players that would play week after week after week. But I mean, for me, I would love to, again, a bit biased, I'd love to see Casemiro or Sterling get a start at right back, because I think we're going to need a bit more pace potentially there against Killie. I'd love to see Barron, Diamandi continuing in the middle, because I think there is a partnership brewing there. I'd like to see Barami move into the middle.
You're just going overboard now. They give you free rein. You've now it's Rangers. It's no Bective Rangers from Dublin, the rugby team. You're not allowed 11 players on the pitch. You just named 15. Then you sound like Derek Thompson doing his predictions for the horse racing. End up betting 23 horses in a 22 horse race.
We'll see how it goes. Frankie's usually not bad at these things, so he's predicted the lineup. We'll see how accurate he is. But since the last international break, we've obviously had 5 wins, a defeat, obviously against Lyon, which was a bit of a spanking. But we've had 5 clean sheets in those games. That includes a good away win in Malmo. Given the turnover in the summer and the injuries, as you've mentioned, Stuart, do you think this is a sign of encouragement that we should hang on to, that we're at least making progress from a defensive standpoint? Because that's been the one biggest weakness that I think we've had.
I think they are. I mean, if you go back even to, like say, Graham Souness, one of the first things when asked why he was buying Terry Butcher and Chris Woods, he said, well, if you don't concede a goal, you only need to score 1 to win a match. And it is that basic and that simple. And people forget about the during Walter Smith's first period at Rangers and indeed his second time around at Ibrox, how pragmatic Walter was at times. I mean, probably only Walter would get away with actually playing a back 5 when he had Gascoigne and Laudrup in the team. Everybody else would be playing like the Harlem Globetrotters. But Rangers had this formation where they were basically playing 5-2-1-1-1, and it worked because you had the players. So I think again, if you don't concede any goals, and this comes down to, let me use the line again, doing the simple things: clear your lines, don't give the ball or possession away in your own half. Make sure you shut down the spaces and shut down the dangerous players, and put your bodies in the line at times. There've been some outstanding defending with, they've had to be outstanding because of the mistakes they've made, but there's been some brave challenges and tackles and blocks going in during these games just to keep a clean sheet. And again, you cannot, we're not quite at the stage of 1,196 minutes with Chris Woods basically bringing out his picnic every game just because nothing was happening in front of him. But it's a decent run of form defensively.
Yeah, and I think for me it was just encouraging to get the maximum points in the league as well, because this stage of the season, 5 points behind, we can't afford to be losing any more ground. I think Killie will be a tough game. It always is, but you've then got Aberdeen quite hot on the heels as well, so they're going to be two big tests for the team, I think, to get through.
And just to pick up on that one, Rob, if I could say, some of the comments from Rangers fans, you'd think they were putting out prayer mats and throwing up bones and burning skeletons and things like that when Ross County are playing Celtic hoping for a result. If you cannot do it yourself, don't rely on anybody else. Dead simple. And right at this minute in time, for the last few games, Rangers have done it. They can't allow it to slip. They can't allow it to slip and then be reliant on others. They've got to do it themselves. And then when the big games come round, do it again.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's probably more the hope than anything else. But as you say, Stuart, we've got to be taking it in our own hands, and we can't be relying on anybody else in Scottish football doing us a favour against them at all. You've got to be winning the big games, and we'll have a big test come the new year to see if the team have learnt any lessons and are up for it from that point of view. I guess it brings us on to Killie. Now we know they'll be up for the game because it's against us, but they've had a bit of an indifferent start to the season. They're sitting in ninth. I think they only had one win in the league, and that was just before the international break against Dundee. But they are actually unbeaten in 5. I think from what I could see, they had been lining up in a straight 4-4-2 for the majority of the season, but that one against Dundee, it was a 3-4-2-1. They'll obviously try and pressure us because it's a plastic pitch. They're at home. What kind of test are you expecting for them on Sunday?
Well, a tough one. I mean, first and foremost, they're on the drastic plastic, aren't they? And, and it's like, if ever you want to see a human form of Bambi on ice, look at Rangers players on any plastic surface. They just don't look comfortable. Kilmarnock will make it difficult because, one, they're used to it, and two, they're extremely good at shutting down space and not giving players time in the ball, which, they'll be aware if they do give Rangers or one or two players any kind of time in the ball, it could be dangerous for them. And thirdly, if it's wet, I think it's down to mindset and how much heart you've got. Are you going to really pitch yourself into challenges when you're running flat out? Are you really going to give it your all when push comes to shove? And I think once or twice in these kind of games, be it at Livingston, even Hamilton Accies at different times, or at Kilmarnock, there's one or two Rangers players just look as if they've almost like chucked it before they got on the pitch.
Absolutely. I think it's one of these games you just roll the sleeves up, pull the socks up, and you've just got to grind it, haven't you? It's
over your knees, so you don't end up with any skint bits.
But then they've got the holes in the back of them as well, so they'll get skint bits anyway. Remember, that's the modern fad. So, on the point that we were talking about earlier with homegrown players, there is one to watch in the Kilmarnock team, I think. And I think he played really well last year. But this year he's started well for Killie, who's Dave Watson. I think he's scored 3 goals from midfield. It's going to be an interesting battle between him and Barron if they're up against each other. Do you think Watson is the type of player we should be targeting, along with the likes of Lennon Miller, given what we'd said earlier on about recruitment policy?
I don't see why not. Unless somebody, unless somebody turns up at Ibrox having won 45 million quid in the Euro Millions this weekend and say, let me oversee your transfer strategy, and I'll go out and buy you half a dozen players that will maybe take you to a title this season. The fact of the matter is that you have got to be looking for players, one, that you can afford, two, they might be available, and three, they've actually proved themselves on the testing ground that you spend most of your time in, and that is the SPFL. So, I have to say, in that particular contest or that particular challenge, this really could be a test of manhood. I'm half expecting the first challenge to be rather full blown, just to say, I'm here and you're not, and if you want to come here, I'm the kind of guy you've got to displace. So it could be quite interesting. I just hope they manage to survive the challenges, either through injury or without the referee noticing what they might be up to.
Fingers crossed. And that brings us on to score predictions. I think I already know what you're going to say.
1-0. Is enough. It's enough. Listen, forget the frills and the chocolate sauce and the sprinkles and all the rest of it. Forget that. 1-0. As long as you win a game and take 3 points, then you're still in the hunt. It doesn't matter who you're playing. Win the game and you're still in the hunt. Forget goal difference and all the rest of it. Because if you win enough matches, you don't need to worry about goals.
No, absolutely. I'd take a 1-0 all day. 3 points, clean sheet, just get it done and dusted. So I'll agree with that. 1-0 all day long for me. So I think that brings us to the end of the show tonight. I just
1-0. Did I say 1-0?
1-0.
Just in case nobody heard me right.
I'm going to put you on the spot then. Who's going to score the goal for Rangers?
It'll be an own goal. Dessers will run into the box, bump into somebody who'll head it past their own goalkeeper. I'm looking back at my crystal ball.
Oh, brilliant. So thanks very much for joining us, Stuart. It was a brilliant chat, mate, and really, really appreciate your time this evening.
Well, for somebody who's not talking to you, I did no bad.
Nah. You can not talk to me anytime, mate. That's fine.
That's good.
So as well as being live tonight, the show will be available on all podcasting platforms, iTunes, Spotify, Acast, Stitcher, etc. Coming up this Sunday on the flagship show at 9:30, we're going to have Brian as your host, who will be joined by Colin and Ben. Hopefully they'll be reviewing a magnificent win for the Gers at Killie, and looking ahead to the next European adventure. All that's left for me to say is a massive thank you to all those watching live on YouTube, and to you listening again. Have a great weekend, folks. Hope we get the 3 points, and bye for now.